Okay, listen. I keep getting the same video recommended every moment of every second of my life. It's like it's YouTube's reason of existence for me to watch this video. No free agency, no freedom, no will, nothing. So you know what? Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to, most of you already know him for sure, but let me introduce you to Cerberus Arms, and I gotta give it to him. That is an epic name. And he has a lot of really cool content, like with ninja and samurai and katana and swords and weapons and this and that. And Hitman VR. How did that happen? A lot of videos with Hitman VR. And the video in question is Katana versus Longsword. Of course, I tackled that at the very beginning of my career. Katana versus Longsword, the sad truth. What makes it sad? Is it sad? Are you messing with me? Oh, seasonal affective disorder. That's what it means. The seasonal affective disorder truth.
Katana versus Longsword.
Yeah.
A tale as old as time. Both technological marvels of their age, these are some of the most iconic weapons ever made.
True.
But which sword is objectively better? Are neckbeards more cringe than weebs?
Well, let me tell you this. I could be both, mate. I could be a weeb neckbeard, a neck weeb. And I have a frogmouth helmet. I have.
Well, we're about to find out.
Cool. Yeah, anime figures. This guy is awesome. This guy is awesome. Appreciate the long hair. Long hair representation.
Today, we're going to answer the age-old question. Which is better, the katana or the longsword? Now, I see a lot of videos on this topic,
Yeah.
so I figured as somebody who genuinely loves both swords, I could take a crack at it. To make things fair, I purchased the katana and longsword from the same manufacturer, Ronin, both priced around $350.
Right.
Here, I have a Ronin
Fair.
Dojo Pro number 14. It has a 30-inch blade made of 1060 through hardened steel. And to compare, I have a Ronin Medieval Longsword number 2 with a 36-inch blade made of 1075 spring steel. Most videos online I see of people comparing longswords to katanas seem to be from a European perspective. Mostly of people sick and tired of all the praise katanas get.
That's true. Although again, as I was saying, when it comes to me, not that he mentioned me, he probably doesn't even know I exist, but I'm just saying, when it comes to me, I am a European who loves Japanese culture as well as medieval. If you were to ask me which one I think is the best sword objectively, you would have to watch until the end of this video. Snaky.
Movies and anime have made out the katana to be some sort of mystical weapon capable of slicing through anything, which is obviously ridiculous.
Like
But I
Goemon.
can't help but notice a hint of resentment when it comes to these comparison videos. Not to mention the obvious bias Europeans have when comparing an ancestral sword from their own culture to another.
Well, a lot of Europeans are weebs, though, so there is that. I think it sort of depends. I'm not taking it seriously. It's tongue-in-cheek. I can get that. I understand that. Scalagrim is awesome, though.
We'll give props to Scalagrim, though.
There you
He
go.
made a video addressing his own
Glad.
biases against katanas, and I respect his ability to be introspective and honest about it.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to it down in the description if you guys want to check out his perspective on the topic.
Splendid.
Like Skal admits, many are just sick of hearing how overhyped katanas are.
True.
And a lot of them seem to take it personally. What these people don't seem to realize is that the katana had a massive impact on American pop culture.
Yeah.
If you're a gun-toting, rootin', tootin', red-blooded American like me, chances are you fucking love katanas. So you grew up on martial arts movies, and you're really into Highlander when it first came out. Seriously, if you grew up as a kid in America during the 90s, you were bombarded with the awesomeness of katanas. From TV to movies.
It is the same in Europe, though, because we get all of these movies usually dubbed. For example, in Italy, where I'm from, they will be dubbed in Italian, but we get all of your fixation with the katana. Like in the 80s and 90s, all I was watching was American movies dubbed in Italian, because of course I couldn't understand English at the time. So we do get that secondhand, let me tell you that. So we do understand the perspective.
Not to mention, this is right around the same time that anime came to America in full force. To a young, impressionable kid, the cool factor of katanas was undeniable.
Absolutely.
Back then, there was just a level of mystique about katanas because we knew so little about them. It was a mysterious sword from a faraway land that looked like nothing we'd ever seen before.
I agree.
And growing up as an American, we didn't have a cultural sword of our own, so we clung to what we were constantly eye blasted with in popular media.
That's an interesting perspective. I never thought about it that way. How about, what would be your opinion? Because of course, Americans are Americans. Everyone is an American. If you're born in America, you're an American. But for instance, in the case of my wife, she has German and Irish ancestry. In other words, as an ancient Roman, I've married a barbarian lady. Divide et impera, my friend. Divide and conquer. What am I on about? But at the end of the day, clearly you're an Asian American, so you do have ancestral swords. Maybe, I don't know where your ancestors are from. You absolutely would be connected. You're an American, but you also have that ancestry. If you're an American and you're white, you can absolutely be connected to your European ancestry. I mean, if your grandfather was from freaking Europe, it's just a couple of generations for a lot of people. Because a white American, an Asian American, an African American, you're all American. If you're born in America, you're an American.
In contrast, European swords were rarely romanticized in American movies.
Right.
Sure, there were plenty of movies about knights, but their swords were never a focus. They
True.
were generally just seen as a tool or weapon the protagonists used, with the exception of Lord of the Rings, which is why many Americans, including myself, became obsessed with medieval weaponry. Let's be honest. Nobody actually thinks a katana can cut straight through another sword. Anyone who does is either 9 years old or sleeps with an anime body pillow every night.
Yeah.
All right, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the pros and cons of these legendary swords.
Please.
And to help me do this, my buddy Brandon, who practices HEMA, drove down to do some sparring with me to see how these swords stack up against each other. Keep in mind, neither of us are experts, and we're not trying to kill each other. I just figured a comparison video wouldn't be fair without actually physically pitting these swords against one another.
He seems to have pretty decent form, so I wonder what he practices, because he said his friend is a HEMA practitioner. I wonder what he practices. Anyways, I appreciate the disclaimer, thanks. Very honest. American movies did not do justice to European swords, because in fact there is this misrepresentation of swords being extremely clumsy, sometimes dull, heavy, slow, and all of that is false, of course, as he knows. As a European, I do say I have a problem with, and that's why we're trying to correct it, together with the Americans who now know because they practice HEMA. This is a beautiful video, by the way, everything in 4K.
Right off the bat, you can tell the longsword has a significant range advantage, allowing the longsword user to pressure me with thrusts while at a relatively safe range. If the longsword fighter is skilled enough, they could potentially stay out of kill range of the katana, all while still being able to strike at their opponent. Yeah,
it's a good point. Absolutely agree with him. Katana's length, however, up to a certain extent, even today when you're like a professional Iaido practitioner, rather than having one standard length, it's sort of based on your height and limb proportion and length. I wonder if the katana that you have is the correct length for you. Because if you're a taller guy, you should wield a little bit of a longer katana. But he's correct. On averages, long swords are absolutely longer than katana, so that is an objective advantage.
Also, since the blade is double-edged, the longsword allows for rapid follow-up attacks with the back of the blade, making it more unpredictable than the katana's single edge.
Yeah, you do use the false edge. The katana can still, like, even if you have a single edge, of course, not a correction, just expanding. So, as someone who practiced both HEMA and Kendo, a little bit of Kenjutsu, when you are wielding a double-edged sword, as you say, you do this, and then you flip it and hit with the false edge, the true edge and the false edge. That's very nice. What I would do with a katana in that situation, so someone is a single edge, is that you just do edge reorientation. You can still do the same move. It's just that you have to imagine that this is the part that has the cutting capability, the edge. And so as I move it, I cut one temple, move it around, and then I'm still doing it. Whereas with something that is double-edged, the way you do it, it can be different. It's that the movement is slightly different.
And when it comes to defense, the longsword's imposing crossguard provides much more reliable protection than the katana's tsuba.
True. Objectively true. Lovely to see it in action.
The crossguard can also be used as a bludgeoning weapon if your opponent gets too close.
Yeah.
The longsword's biggest advantage, in my opinion, is that practically every strike doubles as a block, which greatly increases your survivability in a duel. The longsword is extremely versatile.
Although then again, I think rather than blocking, deflection would be the best thing to do. But then again, I'm not an expert either.
But with that said, the length of the sword generally makes it slower and less viable
nice
in
cut.
combat than the katana.
Nice cut to the
Sure, you
throat.
can use the crossguard to bash your opponent.
Right in the middle here. That's, by the way, the end. If you manage that, your opponent is gone, unless they have a helmet.
Shorter, more nimble katana, you can thrust and slash at full efficiency, even in close range. Keep in mind there are an ass load of different types of longswords. Here,
Very good,
a chart
yeah.
of how many different types of longswords there are.
I will be a little bit pedantic with this statement, but please do keep in mind if you do watch I don't know what his name is. Let me check. You know what? I'll call you Cerberus because that's an awesome name. I'm going to be a little pedantic here, but I do that. That's me. I don't mean to be offensive or anything. You're doing a fantastic job, and this video is great. I love it. But these are not all longswords. This is not a longsword. This is not a longsword. This is not a longsword. This is the Oakeshott typology chart, and these are not all longswords. Plenty of these are single one-handed spada di lato, one-handed swords. So it's just as a little pedantic detail that I wanted to add for precision. It is also possible that he knows this very well, and he just misspoke or simplified it for the general audience, of course.
God damn, that's a lot of variety. It's like the fucking Baskin-Robbins of swords. For this comparison, I chose what I consider to be the quintessential
Very good choice.
hand-and-a-half longsword.
Very good choice.
And if you disagree with me,
Isn't that just two-handed, by the way?
I respect that. You probably have some pretty valid reasons for it.
Or maybe I'm wrong.
But you know what? This is my video. Now, what the katana lacks in range, it more than makes up for in speed. The shorter, lighter blade allows for lightning-fast strikes, but means the katana user will need to close the distance, which can be extremely dangerous. Which brings me to my next point. In my opinion, the biggest difference between these two swords is not their blades, it's their fighting style. While the longsword relies on range and focuses on defensive cuts that double as blocks, the katana is a much more brutal weapon. A warrior who lives by the code of Bushido does not fear death. Live by the sword, die by the sword.
Okay, yeah, I disagree with this statement. It's still very cinematic, but I understand it's entertaining. It's just that, yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check, I want him to show us the swords, but I'm going to skip through the cutting, the test cutting, so that if you want to check that one out, absolutely click the link in the description to watch the original episode. And then after we look at these swords, we'll move into the conclusion and see what he thinks.
All right, guys, so we're gonna test out these swords and see how well they cut. Looking at specs online is one thing, but actually wielding the sword and doing some real cutting,
Yeah,
a whole different story.
absolutely.
A lot of long swords, high-end wise, don't really come with scabbards, but this one does. It's not super nice or
Yeah,
anything, but
not
it
great.
is nice that it comes with one. It's got this kind of cheap
Yeah.
sword belt. Generally, any long sword that comes with a scabbard is gonna have a pretty shitty sword belt.
So he has a good point in this case. I understand why he's happy that he came with a scabbard, because it makes it so much easier for transportation and storage. But when it comes to me, when I will order an Albion, I might do it before the end of the year so I can write it off taxes. When I will order an Albion, I will have a scabbard created by a specialist separately. Because personally, it's because I want it to look historically accurate, but secondly, and then have my own mounting that it's going to look good, hopefully. But then again, it's also because what's the point in having a cheap scabbard? For me, there is really no point. If anything, yeah, transportation, I suppose. So let's look at the sword.
But, you know, it's cool. It comes with one. Not bad for the price.
Yeah, 350. He has a point. And so does the sword.
It's a nice blade. It's a handsome blade.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of distal tapering, which is actually pretty
taper.
impressive. It's got a genuine leather handle, which is stitched nice
it looks
and
good.
tightly. I
Looks
will
good.
say the crossguard The edges are pretty sharp. If I
Oh, the edges. I'm so glad. For a moment, I thought it was wobbly. I'm like, oh no. But no, it doesn't look that because it looks pretty good for 350. I'm impressed because I usually for a good longsword, you got to pay like 1,800. It depends on the maker, but I'm saying in general. So pretty nice.
ram my hand really quickly across it, I could potentially cut myself. Same for the pommel. But you know, you're paying $350 for a battle-ready sword. You can't really expect too much. But overall, pretty nice. The balance is a little weird on this sword.
Really?
The balance is about here, which you really want the balance to be at the last, 4 inches of the blade for a long.
You know what? I disagree with you. I mean, a mace, sure, you will have the balance in the business end, same with an axe. But with swords, the balance is usually closer to the hilt and the guard. You're saying that the balance is over, I think he said over here, which, I mean, I would have thought it would have been higher, honestly. I think it is higher. I mean, I might be wrong. If I do buy this, which I might, I mean, 350 sounds pretty good. I might buy it. I'll let you know what the balance is. I think he may be incorrect with this one. But I don't know why he said that the balance should be at the tip. I never heard of that when it comes to a sword, unless it's a freaking falchion.
Longsword, not awful, not unusable, but definitely not a refined sword by any means. Balance is really important when it comes to swords.
He's absolutely correct when it comes to that. Let's check out the katana.
It's the Ronin Katana Dojo Pro number 14. It's got a really nice, handsome red saya. Pretty cool sword.
Yep.
So we have a through hardened high carbon steel blade.
Beautiful.
Which is why there's no homon, so it's not differentially hardened.
Of course, this means that it's not a good representation of feudal Japanese swords, but it is a gorgeous katana. I will give him that.
I will say this sword is without a doubt the sharpest sword I own. I did not touch it. This is factory sharpness. This thing is scary sharp. It's kind of that sharpness that when you feel it, you're like, oof. I would not want to be on the receiving end of this edge. Sword. I cannot stress enough how dangerous an armed combatant is when they do not fear death, and the katana is a perfect encapsulation of that philosophy. End the single devastating strike or die in battle with honor. To a samurai, nothing is more important. Similar to the Vikings, who are known as the most vicious, fearsome warriors in all of history. While the longsword is built for picking out weak points in your enemy's guard, the katana is balls to the wall victory or death. Now, we're not here to argue who's a better fighter, knights or samurai, because that's an impossible thing to test. I just thought it was important to mention because, again, no other comparison video I've seen has ever factored this in. All right, that's enough chit-chat.
I think the reason why, let me respond to that. The reason why we don't really factor that one in, Cerberus, the reason why we don't factor that one in, oh well, this one was brutal because the samurai wanted to live or die by honor, which already is a sentence that we might want to deconstruct a little bit, particularly contextualizing what honor means, specifically in, say, feudal Japan or the Sengoku period, because it might be different to your expectations. But on the other hand, I mean, a medieval knight was a professional. They were brutal on the battlefield. Absolutely, they were brutal. Some, specifically the ones that had really strong religious connotations, such as the Templars, yeah, good luck having those retreat. I mean, there is the religious aspect of it rather than the philosophical aspect of it. But then again, even the philosophy in Japan is strongly connected to religion anyways. But yeah, at that point, it really is sort of similar to the correct statement you made when you said, well, you can't really say a knight or a samurai would win because it's impossible to test. There is too much variables and variety. Same with this other statement about which one is brutal and which one is really ready to die for their honor, for their cause, for their master. It would be an individual by individual situation. You did have coward samurai that ran away. You did have lying samurais that would just butcher a bunch of innocent people and cut their noses off and pretended they defeated multiple soldiers in the enemy army, even though all they did was just go to a nearby village. There are mentions of this, and attacked innocents. They're still samurai, absolutely dishonorable if you think about it. But of course, there were also samurai that were extremely courageous and brave and proficient. But it's the exact same thing with medieval knights. There were knights that were extremely courageous, brave. They charged front of the line, in the middle of the battle, against hundreds of showering arrows, for example, Battle of Agincourt or Azancourt. So no, I think the reason why we don't mention it is because it's, again, one of those unfalsifiable claims. It's one of those statements that I think draws too much from pop culture. Also because the idea of, samurai were all about honor. Well, honor in the feudal period means you have to bring prosperity, victory, land, and wealth to your lord. How you do it oftentimes doesn't matter. Even though when we imagine honor, we think this very honorable samurai who he wouldn't do the stuff that is not right, like he wouldn't take unfair advantage against his opponents because that's dishonorable. Oh no, they would. They would. Because what would be dishonorable from a feudal perspective for a samurai that manages, for example, to disarm his opponent, and then what would you think is going to let the... You didn't say this, and not you. I'm saying you in general, not trying to strawmanning the guy. He's cool. But I'm saying, imagine you disarm someone, what are you going to do? Just let them pick up the sword because it's dishonorable to stab them in the back? No, they're going to do it. They're going to cut them in pieces. Because what would be dishonorable would be to lose that fight or that battle or that specific situation. Imagine you're taking on an enemy commander, and then what? You're not going to do it because they're going to throw sand in their eyes. They're not going to care. Honor existed, absolutely. But it's not the sort of honor that we think as modern people due to anime or manga and Hollywood, if you will. So yeah, that was just what I wanted to say about that. Let's see, the next section is going to be fun. You know, maybe after I watch it, finally, YouTube will be like, oh, now you can have your 1 million subscribers so you can get the play button. I think this is what I was waiting for. This is my last test to get the play button. The gold. Yeah. I feel like it was easier to get the gold in freaking StarCraft 2. Okay, so for the testing, as I say, refer to the original video. Let's see his conclusions then.
Both these swords actually exceeded my expectations. For entry-level blades, they're actually pretty competent cutters, even with their awkward balancing. The Katana greatly outperformed the Longsword in terms of slashing, but came nowhere near the precision and range of the Longsword's thrusts and defensive capabilities. So let me put it in a way you guys can understand. The Katana is a pure DPS weapon through and through, while the Longsword is a more balanced weapon meant for a tank.
I disagree. Both Longsword and Katana are for DPS. DPS. One-handed sword and shield is a tank.
And the other? The answer is no. They both have their place and their intended purpose.
Good.
And some people just gravitate towards one more than the other.
Yeah, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One analogy here, I see. A very cool video. I loved it. It was really, really interesting, and I'm going to definitely check out. Let's give him a like. Do give him a like. Leave a comment. If you enjoyed this video, don't just give me a like, give him a like too. After saying that, thank you so much for watching. And remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Longsword is better.